Anyway, Linda, you may remember the name, and I wonder if the audience does, of Stephen Paddock. Stephen Paddock will go down in history, 58 dead, hundreds injured, and this is from the Mandalay Bay Hotel and MGM Resorts mass killing. And I want to bring on not only a person who is an attorney that's involved in some of these cases, but a person who was actually at the scene of the shooting, and a good friend. We've done a lot of media together. Brian Claypool. Brian, how you doing?
Hanging in there, Bob. Great to see you again. Great work you're doing.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Listen, you're always a pro, and you know, listen, we do a lot of media together, but man, when I was reading that you were actually there, I get goosebumps right now thinking about it. Can you give us just, I know you've done this a million times, Brian, but just give us an idea of what you observed and the intensity of it, because I know that you're continuing to be involved in this now as a lawyer.
Yeah, and by the way, for your viewers, I mean, I'm still working through a lot of trauma, and these MGM lawsuits have re-victimized and re-traumatized me. But just for your viewers' sake, I was right to the left of the stage, and I initially heard a few pops. You know, like everybody else, I thought it was fireworks, but I looked up in the sky behind me, I didn't see anything, so I was initially getting worried. And then I just started looking right at Jason Aldean's face, he was singing, because I knew that if he reacted and left the stage, that it was going down, something bad. And then I'll just never remember the moment where I saw him cup his guitar like under his armpit and rush off the stage. And man, I got to tell you, Bob, for a moment there, I thought it was going to be the end of the world. And then the mass shooting started, and you know, I kind of ducked. I just ducked, and then what I did is I put my two hands over my ears like this, because I expected to be hit by some bullets, and I didn't want them to hit my brain, my head. But in so doing that, though, it was so terrifying because some people were still standing, and I was grabbing at the bottom of their pants, like yelling, "Get down, get down!" And I mean, I fully expected to die during that first round of shots, because the bullets felt like they were right next to me. I could hear them pinging. You could feel the energy of the bullets. I didn't think I'd get back to see my little girl.
Gosh, Brian, you know, and I've known you a number of years, and I know your energy on TV and your facial expressions, and I can see that this is, you know, greatly affected you, as it did all of us. When we know somebody is actually there, it takes on a completely different dimension. But listen, let's talk about this second victimization that you referred to, because, you know, I'm really disturbed, and I want you to explain to our viewers the law. But I want to read a quote from MGM that I find to be despicable, okay, in terms of what it is that they are doing. And they should take it on the chin financially for this, and they should take it on the chin as far as people who are patronizing these places, because they're essentially trying to stop these lawsuits. And if I got this right, Brian, and I know I do, here is a quote as to why they're trying to stop the lawsuits, and then I want you to tell me exactly what's happening legally. They're doing this, and here's their answer: for a timely resolution. And this is really a killer. This one really gets to you in, I guess, the greatest depths of hypocrisy. In the best interests of the victims, the community, and those still healing. Tell them, Brian, what it is that MGM is saying that they're doing for the victims and the people that are still hurting. Tell them what they're doing in the courtroom.
Yeah, so what they're doing, Bob, is reprehensible. They have MGM has jumped deep into the swamp, and I'm wondering how far down the gutter they're going to go, and how low are they going to keep kicking victims of this shooting. So what they're doing, just so everybody's clear, there have only been a handful of lawsuits filed. I represent over 75 victims. I'm partnering with Robert Eaglet and his firm in Vegas. We've only filed a handful of lawsuits, Bob. A lot of folks don't know that. What they did, though, MGM, is they went out and got the names of about 2,500 victims who they think are going to file lawsuits. And then they file 2 federal court actions, one in Nevada, one in California, to preempt the impending lawsuits that we planned on filing, and to seek an order from a judge that they are immune from liability under this nebulous law that was enacted by Congress in 2002 called the Safety Act. So they're trying to hide behind this law to get a declaration that they have no liability in the Vegas shooting. And what they're doing, basically, what you said is they're re-traumatizing every victim who was at that shooting. I have a client in Alaska whose son was killed, Bob, and she was in tears yesterday saying, "Has my son, who's dead, been named in a lawsuit?" And I had to tell her, yes. They're suing dead people, too.
I tweeted about this yesterday, Bob.
Yeah, and you know, Brian, we have Linda Kenny Bodden with us here. She is a person who frequents a lot of, you know, poker places and whatever.
Poker for the WSOP.
Casinos. So what do you think, Linda, about this?
I tweeted about it. I thought this is the most egregious. I don't know who gave them this advice to sue victims in federal court, so they have to go to federal court with a lawyer. They're in pain. People are dead. I think that everybody should give them the public relations media that they want for this suit, and don't go to their places. I know that, you know, I just came back from the WSOP playing poker, and half of the strip is MGM hotels, but there's an MGM hotel in New Jersey. They bought the Borgata, and for me, I am not going there to play poker anymore until this suit is gone, because this is the most despicable, as Bob would say, thing I have ever seen, to do this to people that have been traumatized.
Yeah,
you know, I know I'm supposed to be objective. I'm objectively saying this is awful.
Well, you know, horrible, uncivil, despicable, hateful, uncaring, and to use the idea that they're trying to help victims and help those who are healing.
That's right.
The hypocrisy of it. Hey, Brian.
And they could get the same result in state court. By the way, they could plead this in state court and let a judge decide it, at least keep it in the one forum so these victims don't see this.
Right. So, hey, Brian, listen, the law that you referred to that they've sued dead people over, who haven't even brought lawsuits into a courtroom, dragging these victims and the victims' families who otherwise have not done anything legally, is called the, you got to love this, Linda, you got to love, Brian, you got to love these politicians.
Oh, yeah.
The Support Anti-Terrorism by Fostering Effective Technologies Act of 2002, also known as you indicated, the Safety Act, which essentially says you can't be held liable to defendants for death or injury or damages stemming from attacks because what they're saying, the company, is they employed security measures from a company that was certified by the Department of Homeland Security. So simply because a company was certified by Homeland Security, they went out, found victims, found people who haven't brought legal action, and filed a lawsuit against them. Do I have that right, Brian?
Yeah, Bob, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. But there's two fundamental problems with the MGM's argument. Number one, the immunization from liability only occurs if it arises out of, quote, a terroristic act, terrorism. And here's the irony in all of this. Sheriff Lombardo in Las Vegas made it perfectly clear 100 times or more on TV all over the world that this was not an act of terrorism. Remember all that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're clear this is not terrorism. Well, guess what, MGM? Guess what? That's going to nip you in the butt, because this is not an act of terrorism, and we're going to make the argument in court that this Safety Act does not apply. That's the first argument. And then here's the second one nobody's talking about. Even if some judge, a federal judge in Nevada or California, somehow thought that this was an act of terrorism, MGM still has to prove that the security company that they employed at the Route 91 concert was, and these are exact words in the law, effective and had utility. Think about that, you guys, for a second. 58 people were killed, over 1,000 injured, thousands more suffering from PTSD. So clearly, the security system they had in place was not effective and had no utility. So they're going to lose on this argument.
You know, Brian, myself, I know you, and I know Linda, we represent some high-profile clients and businesses in both civil and criminal contexts. And I always say this, it never ceases to amaze me at how they'll do some boneheaded, ridiculous, insensitive, hateful thing like this and not realize the brand damage that they're doing to themselves and the boomerang effect this is going to have.
Fantastic point. And Linda made a good point, too. From a PR standpoint, this is a death sentence for the MGM.
And it should be.
This is a big mistake on their part. What they should have done, I think Linda alluded to this, Bob, they could have, there's a couple small cases that were pending in Clark County Superior Court. What they could have done is simply filed what's called a motion for summary judgment as to a few of the victims and asked a judge in state court to make a determination on this issue of whether this Safety Act applies. That's all they had to do. But instead, they did this big dog and pony show. And another reason why they did it we haven't talked about is a couple weeks ago, you probably reported on this, we found out that 3 years ago they had a convicted felon in one of their rooms in the Mandalay Bay with ammunition, right? So that was devastating to them on the foreseeability issue, because we have to prove in this case it was reasonably foreseeable that something like this could happen. That was a devastating blow to them. So what do? They go out on this PR march by suing 2,500 victims.
Don't you want to know, Brian, who arranged that, who said that, who advised them? I'd like the person who advised them to do this and signed off on this to stand up before the cameras in front of these victims today and say, yes, I am the person who advised them. Show some courage against these victims who really have shown nothing but courage here, given what's happened here. This is just hard. I can't explain how horrible. I'm so upset about this. I can't tell you.
And you know, Linda, we talk about this, and Brian, we've talked about this on hits that we've done. You know, law in the end analysis is about common sense and decency. It's about common sense is the hallmark. You don't need to go to law school to be a good lawyer. I mean, you got to do that to get into that courtroom. But what lawyer or bean counter at MGM could have possibly thought, do you know, if you do know, that this was a good idea?
Yeah, and here's another thing, Bob and Linda. All throughout the hockey season in Las Vegas, the MGM, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, they had a great year. They went to the finals, right? Well, you know what the MGM did? This is how hypocritical they are. Every other game, they would bring out a victim of the mass shooting that I was at, right? And they would honor that victim, right, in front of the crowd, get all this media exposure. Well, guess what? I wonder if MGM is now suing the same victims that they honored at all of these hockey games throughout Las Vegas. It is flat out illogical, indignant, insensitive, and reprehensible.
I personally don't think it's illogical, Brian. I think that they were taking advantage and pulling on the heartstrings of people by honoring these folks. And I would love to see you and your crew of people, we're going to get to how to reach out to your group, to be able to do an assessment of whether or not those very people that they honored for the bottom line of helping themselves out are the very same people they're suing now to help their bottom line out. And while we're on that, Brian, I'm told that you have started an organization of Route 91 Strong. Please tell us what that's about and how we can reach out.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, because you might be talking to my co-founder soon. Her name's Lisa Fine. Lisa and I were both survivors, and we formed Route 91 Strong within 2 days of the shooting. We hadn't eaten in 3 days, hadn't slept, but we felt like we needed to do something. During that second round of shooting, I went from I'm going to die to, you know what, if I live, I am going to make sure this never happens again in a civilized society. So that's when I reached out to Lisa. The both of us had done an interview with Chris Cuomo together on CNN, and we just connected through the heart. And basically, Route91Strong.org, if your viewers take a look at it and can help us out, we basically raise money that goes directly to victims of gun violence, whether it's families that are suffering from PTSD and need help with mental health treatment, or we've had many people reach out who are literally Bob and Linda, they literally can't, they have trouble functioning anymore. So they lose their jobs. I have one client actually in Oregon who was fired from his job, for example, as a teacher because he would break down sometimes in class thinking about the shooting. So they're having problems paying their mortgage, things like that. People have trouble paying bills. So that's what we do. We are going to support victims of gun violence throughout the rest of our lives. Our legacy has been changed, altered, and galvanized through this mass shooting. We're trying to do something positive out of this negative situation.
Now, Brian, just real quick, we got time for one more question. This was not where you guys were at this concert. Was not actually on an MGM property. Is that right?
Well, now that we've researched that, and an entity of a subsidiary of MGM. It's MGM Realty Inc. They owned that property. Wow. So that's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them in this litigation. That property is owned by a subsidiary of MGM.
Well, that's a really important fact. And one of I love our viewers and the people in the chat room. BB314 asked this question, and I'm curious as to whether or not what your thoughts are. And the statement is, no more casino, hotel, outdoor concerts. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it depends on where the concert takes place, but I'll never go to another outdoor concert in Las Vegas. I mean, it's extremely dangerous. We haven't talked much about the security that MGM had at the venue. I was there at the venue, Bob, and I will tell you that other than a couple of Las Vegas PD in uniform, I didn't really see much in the way of security staff at the venue. And here's another important point we haven't talked about. Is how is the outdoor venue set up? That to answer your viewer's question, it depends on how well it's structured. And what I mean by that is, toward the end of me trying to get out, Bob, I had no idea where I was going. There were no exits. There were hardly any exits at all. And then what happened is I tried to get out through the north end. Police officer was screaming at me. He saw me. I was in open fire. He's like, "Go to the north." And I'm like, luckily I knew where the north was. Right. So then I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm going to survive. And then it was like a bottleneck on the freeway, Bob, like literally gridlock, like hundreds of people, some who had been shot, screaming, some on the ground trying to get up. We couldn't get out. There was like a 3-foot exit.
And that's how people get trampled, right? That's how people get trampled, right?
So that's the issue. If you're going to go to an outdoor concert, you might want to do your due diligence before you actually go, because it was utter chaos and a nightmare trying to get out of the venue.
Yeah, so Brian, I mean, we have some of our other people that are viewers that are saying, well, there's other contexts of outdoor concerts, but the point is, these are facilities where you're making money, and they're your properties, and you have to make sure that they're safe. And I think you importantly bring out that if there were a catastrophic incident, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an active shooter, it could be a number of different things, is that there's not choke points, and that people are given complete directions how to escape as quickly as possible. Brian Claypool, my friend, my prayers and blessings to you and the other victims in this case. And I want our viewers to, if you could, we'd love you to go to Route 91 Strong. Brian, I wish you the best, my man, and I hope that everything with you and and these lawsuits and making sure that they get thrown out and holding MGM to task comes to fruition. Let's go to a break.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
You got it, Brian. Thank you.